pilgrim in the trench of slaughter heed. When all nations preside, none preside. This is history, extinction. The lone administrator until a cowed shape. Formlessness embodied raises his hand. He raises his glimmering hand. O Achra, Konabeb, O sacred flood, O changed, rippling earth. This is recited from the June Sea Exhortations fragment. This is one of the many exhortations that follows the pilgrim sent by their god to reach a place in the lands of Achra, a brutal and unforgiving land filled with unimaginable horrors and monsters that can turn an individual's power upside down in the blink of an eye. Path of Achra is part of the older family tree of roguelikes, the kind where older graphics reside and an entire keyboard is used to perform a vast array of actions, and they are the kind of games that promise near infinite replayability due to the availability of choices and decisions presented in their sandbox. This game, however, I have found to be one of the easier ones to get into, while simultaneously displaying its own layers of complexity by virtue of what it offers under the hood. Sandbox games and traditional roguelikes have traditionally been a successful match. Sandboxes provide the necessary freedom needed for the deep and complex mechanics that traditional roguelikes have to flourish. Now, what do I mean by traditional roguelikes, you may ask? It has been stretched to such a degree, has spawned across many different genres, that the term has become diluted as a result, making it harder to constitute what truly makes a game a roguelike. Traditional roguelike is a term that makes the effort to commit to the original ideas of the game that started it all, called Rogue. Throughout that time, many other roguelike experiences would spawn such as Moria, NetHack, Angband, Zorbus, Tales of Magile, Cogmind, Caves of Cod, Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead, Unreal World, Dwarf Fortress, the list goes on and on. What they have in common are the amount of choices and actions that a player can perform, and an incredible attention to detail in how you interact with their worlds. When it comes to true sandbox player freedom, they are unmatched on the basis of player choice and interaction alone. But they are also notoriously difficult to get into due to their visual presentation, as well as their complex control schemes. They require a lot of patience and a willingness to make mistakes in the effort of learning. Eventually, though, other games would experiment with some of the characteristics of a roguelike game, providing more accessible and simpler frameworks to hook players in. Compare the games that I just mentioned to games such as The Binding of Isaac, or Enter the Gungeon, or Dead Cells, or Hades, what have you. Basically, most of the popular roguelike games that have come out as of late. And the only things that you'll find that they have in common with the older roguelike games are procedural generation, enemy and item randomization, and permadeath. Beyond that, they are entirely different games. And these different games have spawned an offshoot genre of its own called roguelites. Nowadays, the lines between the two frequently get crossed, but some developers are walking the thin line while seeking ways to either expand or simplify the approach to a traditional roguelike experience, which is what Path of Achra does. Path of Achra has the build variety and theory crafting potential that is often explored and puzzled over in other traditional roguelike games, but it also incorporates a auto-battler approach where theoretically it becomes a game that can be played with just a single button, or if you play your cards right, you can get your character to a point where you have to just press one button and then the entire room is cleared. The complexity of a traditional roguelike generally makes it necessary to utilize as many buttons as possible due to the availability of options. But Path of Achra's core gameplay is relatively simple because you can access the entire gameplay loop with just a button. Whether you wait a turn or move a tile or have your character automatically fight, you are still producing a result, an outcome. Path of Achra's gameplay is reactionary due to the incredible amount of synergies that exist. From beginning to end, you are building and molding your character where they either become something more or just another legend that is slowly rusting away in the sands of time. The lore and world of Path of Achra is incredibly deep, from the brief but distinct details told through the items, the monsters, the cultures, the classes, and the religions. Collectively, they weave a chasm filled to the brim with ancient history, forbidden knowledge, and brutal truths. Path of Achra is a world you wouldn't really want to live in, at all. But equally, its world has so much depth and lore that you can't help but want to know more anyways. The Pilgrim, your character, is defined by three choices: your culture, your class, and religion. These are the three building blocks that set the foundations for your character's background, profession, and god of worship that will lead to the eventual build of your character, and the build variety is incredibly deep. It's to the point where you'll experiment for the sake of it, regardless of whether you successfully complete the run or not, just because of the near endless options that you have and combinations that you can make. I have had many playthroughs where I would explore the various effects and synergies I would have on my character just to see what would happen. I would either destroy everything while healing after every attack or perish right in front of a firebird. Up the top is your health and a meter indicating the next turn. Depending on your speed, you have a few chances to perform a few actions before the enemy does, and the enemy roster is also huge. They all have their own nuggets of lore, traits, attacks, and resistances to the number of elements within Path of Achra. And as you fight your way through the accursed lands of Achra, you'll be leveling up your strength, dexterity, willpower, and vigor. These four stats will help you survive against greater odds. And depending on the class that you have picked as well as the specialization that you picked, well, this will snowball into either a very powerful build or a build that will be rendered useless in front of a more powerful enemy that has the opposite effect to what you wanted to do in the first place. So, you have the four attributes, then you have the skills that you can pick. You have so many to pick from, but so few to hold on to. And picking the wrong ones inconsiderately can have disastrous consequences. Things can be going really well until you spawn in a room and accidentally kill yourself. And it could have come from a number of reasons you caused many rooms ago. It's a game of risk with a high promise of reward, but also a high promise of getting annihilated if you end up in the wrong room. Analyzing the existing synergies on top of your items, skills, status stacks, resist stats, and points attributed to your block, armor, speed, encumbrance, flexibility, attack, and poise, there is a lot of data here to read through, and it's a game that rewards the patient reader. The game is turn-based and can be played automatically if you want to speed through everything. But unless you know exactly what you're doing, I wouldn't recommend this from the get-go. Each turn shows a history of actions that you can read down on the screen, and if you want to attune your build more efficiently, reading those actions could make the difference between life and death in this game. The more you ignore information given to you, the more likely you'll fuck up and die without knowing why. And in each dungeon, you'll have enemies of different shapes and sizes and different effects, and some rooms can either be a cakewalk in the park or a run-ending nightmare. When you complete a room, you have forking paths. Some paths may have more rewards, but also more enemy types. And depending on your build, you may either risk getting a reward that will help your build, even in spite of the powerful enemies ahead, or you may take an easier path so that you can survive for longer. Items that you pick up can also be sacrificed, which can add benefits to your worn items and weapons, as well as your character, especially when you have a build that you're happy with. Speaking of builds, you also have specializations, which comes from the investment of skill points, attributed across different elements. Martial is all physical and everything else is elemental. You can mix and match for a variety of outcomes or focus on specific skills that can lead to the unlocking of a class specialization. For example, points invested between Martial and Blood gave me the option to select the prestige class Executioner, which gives me bonus armor equal to 5 times by strength times by main hand weapon size, and killing enemies gives me 100 points of health back. On top of my other growing stats, I was able to constantly heal against waves of enemies as long as I could secure a kill, and this is also compounded by other skills that I have attained, on top of the armor that I was wearing, that would stack heals for me. The prestige classes are like the cherry on top of the build that you experiment with, and once it's in place, there's no going back. Other pieces of equipment can also transform you into other creatures depending on the right conditions. Picking specific skills also gives you a new form. The variety of choices in skills is nearly endless because of how much you can mix and match with. All of the existing parts of the game play off of each other, and each playthrough will always be unique because each class, culture, and religion will also have different outcomes on existing skills, items, stat benefits, prayers, as well as prestige classes. It's a bottomless pit of depth that will satisfy those that have a hard-on for deep character building and theory crafting. And the builds that I had to complete my first 2 cycles aren't even the most broken builds. In fact, there are far more demented and stupid builds that you can come up with that will make you near impossible to kill if you play your cards right. And that is where the true magic of Path of Achra lies, in the sheer versatility of builds. Religions also have a huge effect on your build too. Each god gives you a set of prayer and benefits with some various effects. Just don't pick Eris if you want to rely on prayers. Just don't. At first, you won't have many options, but before you know it, you'll unlock everything in time, and from that point on, you can come up with as many broken or useless builds as you'd like. Oh, and if you do manage to secure a victory, the game rewards you with more punishment. The first cycle is the cycle of humility, and each cycle from there on only gets harder and harder. But at the same time, you also level up faster. All this means is that you'll need to carefully assemble your character, all the while getting lucky on specific items, as well as praying to your god that you don't get into a room with an enemy that you don't want to deal with. Eventually, you'll piece things together and understand just how important synergizing really is in this game. Eris may hate prayer, but Aslan's hate praying, so naturally this would make a good pair because they synergize well together. They don't have the opposite opinions on prayer, and their union benefits the player as long as the charges are full. Want to flood the entire room with infinitely spawning ants? Worship the god Formus. Want to be an ape executioner devoted to cutting themselves for Humbaba? Go for it. Path of Achra is a theory crafter's paradise rendered in a traditional roguelike experience, but without the complex control schemes that can often overwhelm beginner players in traditional roguelikes. Path of Achra is still a complex game, but it is still an easy game to play on the basis of controls. Basically, if you have a brain, then you can already get right into Path of Achra. So far, I've only had a few hours into the experience, but it was already a game that I fell in love with not long after playing the demo, which by the way, is also a complete version in its own way. So for those that aren't sure if they'll like this game, I would recommend trying the demo first. The paid version is merely a more up-to-date and realized version of the game with more content and features, and for the asking price, it is well worth it. It is a game that I'm still wrapping my head around. I've yet to discover my own truly broken builds, and to be honest, most of my successes, including the victories, has been a result of experimentation and luck. And in the beginning, that's what it'll end up being. But give it time and you'll slowly piece the game's synergetic gameplay together, understanding how to mix and match correctly, and before you know it, you'll be hooked like a skooma addict. If you can look past the game's retro visuals and the simpler approach to its controls, then you'll have something that is incredibly in-depth, chaotic, and a ton of fun. I will provide some resources that will act as guides, provided by other people that have stalked the lands of Achra far longer than I have, and should help you get a foothold should you wish to have some knowledge beforehand. But I would wholeheartedly recommend going into this game blind and just trying things out, for the fun of it. Because once that blind experience is gone, you will never get it back again. Speaking of the lands of Achra, another addition to the dark and epic tale that Path of Achra weaves is coming, except that the gameplay deviates quite a lot from it. Path of Achra is inspired by games such as Tales of Beguile, Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, and Rift Wizard, but Lands of Achra seems to remind me of the Heroes of Might and Magic. Fantastic series, by the way, go play it. Anyway, Path of Achra is awesome. If you're into character building, it's a no-brainer, and the demo will also carry over your unlocks if you're sold on the idea of buying the paid version. Stay safe everyone, and thanks for watching.